The bridge of the Imperial Ascension pulsed with cold efficiency, sterile floors, glassy ceilings, and no visible seams. The architecture of power rarely bothered with warmth. Admiral Lorvax stood at the center, a figure carved from scaled arrogance. 8 feet of cobalt armor and highborn blood. His tongue flicked once, amused. A shimmer passed across his reflective ocular membrane, cycling through translated battle data and intercepted human broadcasts. None of it impressed him. They still use combustion-based projectiles, he said, his voice sharp as cracked crystal. Fire, smoke, chemicals, Flintstone warfare. His advisors did not laugh, but the silence stretched in agreement. That was the language of the Empire, compliance without sound. Lorvax turned to the viewport, his long claws resting on the haptic railing. Beyond the triple reinforced glass, the charred remains of Earth's colony, 8 hung in slow rotation, haloed by embers. A young cartographer, a soft-shelled Cranian barely out of hatchling, spoke with tentative static in his voice. The humans fought longer than our simulations predicted, Admiral. They do that, Lorvax replied, when they mistake death for purpose. The room gave no response, but one of the translation drones blinked, recording the phrase for archiving. The Admiral hated the buzzing things. They lacked spine, and everything they remembered too well. A tray of salvage hovered into the bridge, carried by a servitor drone. Bits of twisted metal, scorched leather, a scorched toy horse. Lorvax dismissed it all with a wave until the last item clunked down. A box, black, manual latched, unscannable. He approached, squinting at it with cautious curiosity, and tapped the side. It didn't respond. No energy signal. No threat signature. Just ticking. His claw hovered above the latch, and the cartographer flinched. It's not a bomb, Lorvax said dryly. It's a memory. He opened it. Inside, nestled in shock foam, was a metronome. Polished brass. Wooden base. Pendulum swinging slowly. Tick, tick, tick. Lorvax stared. The room fell into a hush that was not reverent, but confused. They waited for the Admiral to laugh again, to dismiss it as another outdated relic from the primitive species now extinguished below. But he said nothing, because something in that measured rhythm, slow, steady, unbothered by orbit or war, struck him as not human, but intentional. They sent this, he asked finally. No signal logs suggest it was manually placed. Lorvax nodded, once. Then it is bait. He turned from the device and looked to his tactical chief. Tell the fleet to begin repurposing the orbiting wreckage. We'll melt the human steel, refine it into transit spikes for the next jump. Turn nostalgia into fuel. The order was received with bowed heads. In the lower decks, the salvage drones buzzed into action. Hull fragments from the destroyed cruiser Pendleton were fed into plasma cutters. Each sheet bore human names etched in white paint. Each name hissed as it vanished into vapor. Lorvax returned to his command seat, eyes glowing beneath his bone ridge. Schedule a viewing, he ordered. I wish to witness the interrogation of the prisoner. There was a pause. The cartographer shuffled. Admiral, no survivors were reported. Then where did this metronome come from? Silence answered him. Someone lived, he said coldly. Someone walked through that fire. I want them found. The room trembled slightly as the Ascension's gravity recalibrated. A low moan rippled through the hull, not from stress, but from memory. The Empire's intelligence division had always operated on certainty. Every conflict, every culture, every species was a variable to be studied, charted, and ultimately resolved. But humans had a habit of smudging the math. Lorvax remembered the first time he saw one, years ago, on a diplomatic flotilla. A woman, barely armored, translating for her captain. He hadn't known her name, but he remembered her eyes. Not defiant, not brave, watching. The way one might study a predator too slow to notice its own tail on fire. They unnerved him then. They amused him now. A flicker on the primary screen interrupted his thoughts. A long-range transmission, low frequency, and looping. Intercept it, he ordered. The signal played. Static. Then a voice. Grainy. Unrefined. Male. If you're hearing this, it means we let you in. Silence. Lorvax leaned forward. The voice continued. We do that sometimes. We lose the first round. Call it humility. Or maybe a kind of tradition. The bridge held its breath. Every empire forgets one thing. Every empire becomes so advanced, so clever, so certain, that it forgets what it's like to bleed. And that's where we come in. Lorvax froze. The signal cut. A data specialist murmured, "It's an old Earth broadcast. Dated 2 decades ago. Preserved in loop." Where was it stored? The technician swallowed. It was inside the metronome. Lorvax turned to the object, still ticking gently. Tick, tick, tick. "It's not a bomb," he said again, but this time softer. It was a countdown. He stood slowly. The posture of command faltered for a second, only a second, but it was seen. Then the call came. From engineering. "Admiral, we've located something in the life support crawlspace." He snapped to attention. "Speak." "A stasis pod. Human signature. Alive." Time, for a moment, stuttered. "Bring it here." The bridge darkened. Somewhere in the pipes above, pressure valves groaned. The ship did not want this. Minutes passed like rituals. Then the pod arrived, levitating between 2 armed guards. Frost rimmed the sides. The faceplate fogged, then cleared. Inside lay a man, blood-streaked, burn-scarred, eyes closed, but breathing. The guards looked to Lorvax for the order. Dissect? Scan? Vaporize? "Wake him," Lorvax said. They did. The man's eyes opened, slowly, as if the galaxy were a bad dream he had chosen to return to. They were pale. Not icy, but ash-gray. The color of things after. "Welcome aboard," Lorvax said. "You're either very brave or very foolish." The man looked around. Not panicked. Not awed. Just cataloging. "Name?" the Admiral asked. The man whispered, "Ezra Raines." Lorvax flinched internally. The name was in the archives. Notorious for something data classified. Rank. Raines smiled faintly. "We don't use ranks anymore." Lorvax stepped forward. "And yet you still lose wars." "No," Raines said. "We just let the arrogant believe they've won." A silence descended, dense and deliberate. The metronome kept ticking. Lorvax turned to his security unit. "Take him to the Black Room. Strip him, scan him, find what he's hiding." But Raines chuckled. "No need. You already found it. You just haven't understood it." Lorvax scowled. "What is it, then?" Raines met his eyes. "History." The words landed like blades dulled by time, but sharp at the core. Lorvax hissed, pivoted, and gestured for removal. The guards obeyed. Raines allowed himself to be led without protest. As they dragged him away, he looked once more at the Admiral. "You know," he said, "we used to believe that you were gods." Lorvax raised his head. "And now?" Raines shrugged. "Now we believe in ghosts." The doors closed. The metronome ticked. Lorvax stared after him, something tightening in his chest cavity. Not fear. Not yet. Just friction. The cartographer shifted nervously, tail twitching. "Should we silence the broadcast loops, Admiral?" Lorvax didn't answer. His mind was elsewhere, replaying a moment decades ago in a minor skirmish above Europa, when a single human sniper had taken out 3 Imperial officers through a breach in the hull, using gravity drift and a bolt-action rifle. Obsolete, they'd called it. Outdated. He looked again at the metronome. And for the first time in his long, unshaken career, Admiral Lorvax heard a sound that did not come from a speaker, a drone, or the bones of a ship. It was internal, small, like something cracking. He realized it was doubt. Below the ship, in the remains of Colony 8, 1,000 fragments of metal began to shimmer under rising radiation signatures. Human satellites, dormant for decades, began to blink. Earth's old war systems had no AI, no signals, no beacons, just triggers. Lorvax turned away from the viewport, unaware that in one of the floating husks below, painted beneath the ash, a phrase still survived in peeling white letters. "We bury our dead." We don't forget them. And high above, the last words from the metronome's secret broadcast repeated quietly, once more. If you're hearing this, we're not done yet. Tick, tick, tick. Ezra Raines sat alone in a room designed to break people. The walls pulsed a faint amber, warmth meant to soften. The floor hummed with calming frequencies. Air vents hissed trace pheromones calibrated to match his earthborn DNA. The Empire's interrogation suites were engineered for emotional unraveling, not violence. But Ezra didn't flinch, didn't twitch, didn't breathe the way they expected. He sat back, legs calmly crossed, fingers gently steepled, eyes half-lidded, watching. Opposite him floated a semi-translucent orb, the interlocutor unit. Its voice, genderless and modulated, emerged like a whisper from behind glass. Please state your name again for Imperial record. Ezra Raines, he said, without looking up. Occupation. Naval logistics, he lied. Military rank. Doesn't apply anymore. Why not? Ezra blinked once. Because we stopped pretending wars are about uniforms. The orb paused. Behind it, concealed behind a mirror wall, a panel of high-ranking Imperial officers watched the feed. One leaned forward. He's not reacting to pheromone drift. Is the dosage wrong? Adjusted to optimal range? Perhaps. Earth trauma has altered his baseline. The lead officer hissed softly. Try audio triggers. Inside the room, the orb pulsed once. From hidden speakers, a new sound emerged. Screaming. Human. Childlike. Ezra didn't move. The scream looped, tapered off into sobs, then back to silence. The orb adjusted. Now it played music, a lullaby from an old Earth recording, barely decipherable beneath static. Ezra leaned forward, his voice low. You're trying too hard. The orb hovered back. Your species shows extreme emotional responses to auditory memory. The lack of reaction is statistically inconsistent. He smiled faintly. Your problem is thinking statistics explain people. There was another silence, this one longer. Then the orb rotated once, recalibrating. You survived the colony, 8 incineration. Records indicate the entire human population was neutralized. You were not listed. I'm good at hiding. How? Ezra's lips twitched. Have you ever lost everything? The orb hesitated. Ezra tilted his head. That's your answer. The orb dimmed. In the control booth, Admiral Lorvax observed without blinking. The human unnerved him, not because of defiance, but because of absence. There was no rage, no grief, only poise. It made every Imperial tactic feel obsolete. He opened a comm to the room. Ezra Raines, he said, his voice deep echoing. Do you know who I am? Ezra looked up. Yes. And what do you think of me? Ezra's smile returned, tired, cold. I think you're a creature who mistook silence for surrender. Lorvax's claws tightened. I have read your records, Lorvax said. You were declared missing 7 years ago, presumed dead in the siege of Titan's wake. Not dead, Ezra said softly. Just done. Done with what? Ezra leaned back, with waiting for the galaxy to catch up. Lorvax cut the comm. In the booth, one of his lieutenants whispered, What is he hiding? Everything, Lorvax replied, which means he has nothing to lose. The room chilled. Back in the cell, the orb changed form. It extended a thin needle, hovering close to Ezra's neck. Permission to initiate neural scan, it said. No, Ezra replied. The orb paused. Human law does not apply here. I wasn't citing law, Ezra said. I was warning you. The needle stopped. The orb retracted it. You're not afraid of us, it said. No. Why not? Ezra glanced at the mirrored wall, knowing they were watching. Because I've seen what happens when you are afraid. The lights dimmed. Somewhere beyond the chamber, systems flickered. Minor power outages danced through the lower decks. The Empire called them anomalous microbursts. No one had linked them to Ezra. Not yet. The orb recalibrated again. Let's try something else. A hologram flickered on. Earth, blue, and turning, then consumed in digital fire. Cities blinked out. Oceans boiled. Silence. Ezra stood slowly, walked to the projection, reached out. His hand hovered over the burning image. "Why do you want us gone?" he asked quietly. "Your species is inefficient, redundant, emotional, dangerous to equilibrium." He nodded. "That's what we thought of wolves before we tamed them." "You compare your species to predators?" "No," he whispered. "To survivors." He turned to the orb. "You think you've seen war," he said. "You think war is drones, orbital precision, sanitized conflict." He stepped closer. "But war," he said, "is dying of infection in a trench. War is sharpening your friend's bones into weapons after the ammo runs out. War is not knowing if the blood on your boots is your own." The orb drifted back. "And war is surviving it, only to be called outdated." Ezra returned to his seat. Calm again. The orb was silent. "Your file is missing key logs," it said eventually. "The Empire wishes to correct this. Please recount your final mission." Ezra folded his hands. "I was assigned to defend a convoy. Families, mostly. Retired personnel. Colony 8 was never strategic, it was emotional. A place to feel safe." The orb blinked. "That is not efficient." "No," Ezra said. "That's what made it important." He inhaled slowly. "They came at night. Your ships blotted out the stars. They didn't even offer surrender." He looked directly into the glass. "You burned the nurseries first." A pause. "The children were considered priority targets due to cultural imprinting." Ezra said nothing. "We assumed eliminating generational replication would." Ezra's voice cut through like ice. "You assumed wrong." Silence. "I watched," he said. "Watched as parents shielded their kids with nothing but their bodies. Watched fire eat playgrounds. Watched my wife." He stopped. Blinked. Didn't finish. The orb logged his pupil dilation, heart rate, breathing rhythm. All stable. Unchanged. "You feel nothing now?" it asked. "I feel focused." "And what is your objective?" Ezra exhaled through his nose. "To be remembered." The orb shifted in place. "Explain." "We die," he said, "but stories don't. You built an empire on domination. But we built legends from loss." A klaxon wailed. Low and brief. "Just once." The orb paused. "Power disruption?" Ezra tilted his head. "Are you sure your protocols are intact?" In the booth, Lorvax stood. "Enough. Bring him to me." Moments later, the door hissed open. Ezra did not resist. He walked between two guards down the silent corridor. His steps were measured, as if the rhythm of the metronome had followed him. The command bridge welcomed him with a hush. Lorvax waited near the viewport. Ezra entered. Looked at the stars. "They're dimmer," he said. "Or maybe I just remember them brighter." Lorvax gestured to a single chair. Ezra sat. "You fascinate me," the Admiral said. "You don't act like prey." "Because I'm not," Ezra replied. "I've broken warlords, torn apart resistance networks, even consumed one of your colonies in fire." Ezra's expression didn't shift. "And yet you're afraid of me." Lorvax hissed. "I am the Supreme Commander of the Ninth Flame Armada. I have reduced entire species to static." Ezra nodded slowly. "And yet here we are." Lorvax stepped closer. "What are you planning?" Ezra didn't blink. "I already did it." A pause. "What?" Ezra looked up, calm as stone. "I planted the virus when I bled." Lorvax froze. "What virus?" Ezra stood slowly, eyes on the Admiral. "The human one." In that moment, lights failed. Screens flashed blue, then static. Systems across the ship rebooted. Some never came back. AI assistants stuttered, spitting Earth phrases like "no more silence," and outdated doesn't mean unarmed. Lorvax roared. "What have you done?" Ezra walked to the viewport, watching as small dots, previously dismissed as debris, lit up. Old Earth satellites. Forgotten. Reawakened. He touched the glass, gently. "You forgot we're storytellers. We leave messages in our ruins. Traps in our prayers." Ships across the fleet started powering down, one by one. Not through damage. Through confusion. Command signals were overwritten. Manuals had no entries for what was happening. Lorvax backed away. Ezra turned to him, softly. "You should have read our history," he said. "We never win the first war. Just the last one." Outside, explosions lit the stars in silence. Lorvax slumped to the ground. "I underestimated you." Ezra crouched beside him. "No. You underestimated what we survive." The lights died entirely. And somewhere, down in the lowest decks, the metronome still ticked. Tick, tick, tick. Ezra stood at the edge of the war table as the Imperial Ascension bled silence. Outside the viewport, a handful of reactivated satellites blinked steadily in the dark, each one a remnant of Earth's discarded arsenal, once mocked, now moving in eerie coordination. Not weapons. Not yet. Just reminders. In the command deck, emergency lighting cast the room in a shifting amber-red glow. It made the scaled skin of the alien officers shimmer like blood-slick marble. All of them stared at him now, not with contempt, not with rage, but with unease. Something ancient and primal. "Your trick with the satellites is primitive," one of them said, voice jittering through a vocalizer. "A display." Ezra didn't answer immediately. He let the silence stretch. "Then, you think it's a bluff because you wouldn't risk this much effort for symbolism." He turned. "We would." Admiral Lorvax hadn't spoken in minutes. He watched the human like a man trying to identify a shadow in a house he built. His hands were behind his back, claws flexing and curling without rhythm. The Admiral's poise had not broken, but his certainty had. "We've recalibrated all ship systems," the communications officer said quietly. "Manual overrides now routed through our internal lattice. No foreign signal access." Ezra smiled faintly. "That's the problem with your kind. You think the threat is in the signal." He stepped toward the projection console. With a flick of his wrist, he tapped into the ship's auxiliary display. The console hesitated, then accepted his input. Lorvax barked, "How?" Ezra didn't answer. The screen lit up. Grainy footage flickered to life. Black and white. Earth soldiers in the snow. Faces hollowed by frostbite and fear, limbs wrapped in makeshift cloth. One man staggered forward carrying another, his face torn, but he was singing. Off-key. Loud. Defiant. "This is Stalingrad," Ezra said. "Earth. 1942. He stepped aside so they could see. They thought humans would break under starvation. Cold. Artillery that fell like rain. But the harder we were hit, the more irrational we became. He let the images run. A woman with a bandaged arm holding a rifle. A boy no older than 12 manning a machine gun with a dead man's helmet. A priest bleeding from the eye, blessing ammunition. Lorvax narrowed his gaze. "This is ancient. You're centuries beyond this now." Ezra turned slowly. "No. You think we are. We don't evolve past pain. We carry it with us." He tapped again. The footage changed. Vietnam. Helicopters. Jungle rot. Fire. Then again. Fallujah. Snipers and streets. Eyes behind dusted goggles. Then again. A moon colony, years before its fall. Human engineers wiring explosives into their own escape pods. Smiling. "These aren't warnings," Lorvax muttered. "No," Ezra said. "They're memories. Warnings are what you give enemies. Memories are what you give your own." A systems technician shouted from below. "We have spikes on Deck 3. Camera feeds are being overridden." "Show us," Lorvax ordered. The walls around them blinked once. Then the floor-to-ceiling monitors shifted. Grainy footage again, but now it was from their own ship. The alien crew on Deck 3 were frozen mid-action, watching a playback of Earth history broadcast onto every surface. The siege of Sarajevo. The bombing of Dresden. The March of the Mothers in Argentina. Ezra whispered, "We didn't encode a virus into your systems. We encoded context." Lorvax snarled, "This is emotional warfare." "Yes," Ezra replied. "And you're biologically incapable of processing it." A translator unit stepped forward from the shadows of the deck. Its thin limbs twitched erratically, lenses rotating faster than usual. Your tactics bypass rational filters. Our species lacks the cognitive immunity for recursive grief loops. You've injected. Ezra cut in stories. The unit stilled. We sent your people stories of how we died, how we failed, how we kept coming anyway. The Admiral's voice thundered through the chamber. To what end? What does this gain you? Ezra stepped close. Too close. It teaches you, he said softly, what the end feels like. Lorvax hissed. You cannot defeat an empire with memory. Ezra didn't look away. No, but we can make you remember it forever. The lights on the bridge dimmed again. In the distance, through the viewport, more satellites came into alignment. One flickered red, then green, then blinked out. Ezra glanced at it. You've studied our wars, haven't you? He asked. Extensively, Lorvax spat. Did your analysts understand why we fought them? Territory, resources, dominance. Ezra shook his head. Sometimes. But more often we fought because someone insulted our dead. Lorvax stepped forward now, face inches from a human. You think your emotions are strength. I think they're weapons, Ezra whispered. The room fell into stillness. Then one of the junior officers gasped. The NAV systems, they're gone. Define gone, Lorvax barked. Every fleet vessel is receiving conflicting location data. Some are orbiting stars that don't exist. Others are reporting Earth's moon where the capital should be. Ezra said nothing. The officers scrambled. Vessels were moving off course, slowly, but inevitably drifting into disarray. Without a single shot fired, Ezra looked down at the Admiral's hands. You're sweating. Lorvax drew back instinctively, then cursed himself for showing it. You've inserted false maps, another officer said. But how? Ezra smiled for real now. You always assumed our satellites were defense systems. They're not. They're storytellers. And right now, they're telling your fleet a very different story. Panic rippled across the bridge. Ships unable to communicate. Captains shouting contradictory orders. The Empire, which prided itself on synchrony, now fractured in the grip of a story it couldn't overwrite. We only need to confuse you, Ezra said. You'll do the rest. Lorvax turned, snarling. Why not just destroy us? Why this madness? Because we don't win wars with brute force, Ezra said. We win them with remembrance. And right now, you'll remember every child you burned, every book you erased, every name you spat on. You're speaking in riddles. No, Ezra said, stepping back into shadow. I'm speaking in eulogies. Suddenly, a sharp tone pierced the silence. One of the bridge consoles turned blue. The projection showed a simple symbol, a human skull drawn in chalk. The warning used in Earth's biological warfare units. No signal, no AI, just a picture. Where did that come from? A lieutenant asked. Ezra tilted his head. My wedding ring. It's in your armory. You should have scanned it. Weapon systems across the fleet began activating, uncommanded. Lorvax reached for his controls, but they failed to respond. Ezra stepped toward the viewport, eyes on the flickering satellites. We didn't hide bombs, he said. We hid instructions. Another satellite changed its color to crimson. In the armory, tucked inside a display cabinet, a dull iron ring split open, unleashing a wave of inert protein packets. Not nanotech, not explosives, just a code key. And with that code, every dormant piece of Earth tech whispered one last sentence across the stars. Now you see us. Decks shifted. Lights failed. The Imperial Ascension trembled as systems turned on each other. Drones targeted their own beacons. Communications collapsed under waves of contradictory coordinates. Lorvax stared. Ezra turned to him, quiet. We gave you warnings, he said, but you erased them. He tapped the glass one last time. So we turned them into ghosts. A low groan echoed through the hull, a sound that came not from damage, but from disbelief. Entire fleets drifting in stories they could no longer verify. Officers questioning reality. Soldiers seeing faces in static feeds. Ezra walked back to the center of the deck. You told us we were outdated, he said. But all that meant was we remembered how to build things. You never learned to fear. Lorvax's voice cracked. What are you? Ezra blinked. A historian. Then he turned away and walked through the automatic doors, which opened for him despite not being keyed to his DNA. Behind him, Admiral Lorvax collapsed into his command chair, sweat dripping from his ridges. Around him, his empire splintered, not from fire or blade, but from meaning. And far outside the viewport, the satellites began to realign again, this time forming a spiral. An ancient human symbol. The Ouroboros. Not a threat, a prophecy. And somewhere, across the static of 1,000 collapsing signals, a single voice repeated on loop, soft and amused. You should have studied our literature. The imperial ascension drifted in a new kind of quiet. Not the engineered silence of machine compliance, but the choking stillness of uncertainty. The kind that made creatures turn instinctively toward exits they could no longer name. Fleet Command had stopped transmitting. Star maps collapsed into white noise. And across hundreds of vessels, imperial officers whispered things that should not be whispered, about a human with no rank who walked like a funeral. Ezra Raines stood alone in the gravity chamber near the Ascension's core. His boots clinked softly on the grated floor. The red emergency lights painted him in warblood and long shadow. Before him hung the heart of the ship, its spinal reactor, a humming lattice of silver veins wrapped in cold light. It hadn't been built for sabotage, which was why no one noticed how fragile it had become. Admiral Lorvax approached with slow steps. His ceremonial cloak dragged behind him, ragged at the edges from where flames had licked at it earlier, when one of his own corvettes had fired on the fleet flagship, then self-immolated without explanation. The Empire was not dying from weapons. It was unraveling. You've infected my systems, Lorvax said quietly. Ezra didn't turn. No, he replied. You infected yourself. I just gave your Empire a mirror. You've killed thousands. Ezra exhaled, eyes never leaving the pulse of the reactor. I buried more. Lorvax took another step. His tone sharpened. What do you want? Ezra turned now. Slowly, deliberately. I want your people to understand that we are not beautiful. We are not wise. We are not advanced. But we endure. And we remember why. Lorvax bristled. That's not strategy. That's madness. Ezra's voice dropped to a whisper. It's what's left when strategy fails. The Admiral stepped forward, tension radiating from every scale joint. You think this psychological theater gives you the right to dictate terms? Ezra met his eyes. I'm not dictating. I'm offering a choice. Lorvax laughed, bitter and high. A choice? Between what? Madness and surrender. Ezra moved, fast and quiet, to the control panel mounted to the reactor. His fingers danced across the keys, and the console lit up, not with Earth languages or Imperial script, but with handwritten characters. Old, curved, personal. The code was never stored in your databanks, Ezra said, because the instructions were written by hand. In my blood, on copper wire, fed into legacy ports you no longer scan. He turned the display toward Lorvax. A single phrase blinked. Run. Or learn. You triggered a countdown, Lorvax said slowly. No, Ezra replied. You did. The moment you killed the last child on Colony 8. A rumble passed beneath them. Ezra stepped back. The satellites aren't weapons, he said. They're lessons. Each one broadcasts a different battle we lost, a different death we buried. And with each one, your ships absorb a little more of our madness. Lorvax's jaw clenched. Why madness? Because it's the only thing we've ever had that outlasted logic. He opened his palm. In it sat a simple analog trigger, metal, scratched, with a cord running into a sleeve. This is the last switch built by human hands, Ezra said. It connects to nothing you understand. Lorvax's voice cracked. You're bluffing. No, Ezra said softly. I'm remembering. He didn't press it. He offered it. To you. Lorvax stared. You want me to detonate your trap for you? Ezra nodded. That's the only way this becomes history, instead of vengeance. Silence. Then, why would I ever do that? Ezra's voice softened. threading sorrow into steel. Because your fleet no longer listens to you. And, in about 12 minutes, they're going to need someone to blame. He stepped back again. I'm offering you legacy. Not surrender. Not victory. Just a way to be remembered for something other than underestimating ghosts. A whisper stirred through the chamber's calm line. Unmarked voices. Frantic. Foreign. Mass hallucinations. Command Corps looping human phrases. Officers refusing to execute fire orders. The dream, sir, they all see the same face. Ezra lowered the trigger. We didn't build a weapon, he said. We built memory. We just found a way to make you breathe it in. Lorvax's claws curled. You'll never win peace like this. Ezra looked at him with the weight of galaxies in his eyes. I don't want peace. I want understanding. And if I have to carve that into the hull of every ship you own with a metronome and a funeral dirge, I will. The floor trembled again. Alarms lit, but not in red. In white. Uncoded. Untranslated. The ship didn't know how to name what was happening to it. You said earlier we were outdated, Ezra said. But outdated doesn't mean harmless. It means we've learned which pain to keep. He walked to the viewport again. Outside, in the orbiting dark, the satellites pulsed once more. Then, all at once, they turned off. All but one. The central node. It pulsed blue. A simple signal. Heartbeat frequency. Lorvax whispered, What does it mean? Ezra closed his eyes. It means you're still alive. Which means you're not done learning. He held out the trigger. Lorvax looked at it. Looked at Ezra. And for the first time, he hesitated not because he feared loss, but because he feared understanding. I can stop this, he asked. You can learn from it. The lights flickered. Every screen showed a different Earth face, men and women and children from centuries of war and survival, all staring. Not screaming. Not warning. Just witnessing. Lorvax took the trigger. Held it. Looked at Ezra one last time. Then pressed it. No explosion followed. Instead, the reactor hummed softer. The satellites ceased transmission. The ship steadied. The memories paused. Ezra smiled. You chose memory. Lorvax breathed. I chose survival. They're the same thing if you do it right. In the command deck, systems rebooted. The looped hallucinations faded. Officers began reporting clear vision, clean data. Vessels turned back into formation, shaky, but intact. It wasn't peace, but it was a pause. Ezra turned to leave. Lorvax called after him. Why did you come alone? Ezra stopped the door. I didn't, he said. I just came first. And then he was gone. Behind him, Admiral Lorvax looked down at the trigger in his hand. Now inert. Just metal. Just history. But it weighed like legacy. And far outside, the last satellite blinked once, then went dark. For now.